Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In today's tutorial video, we'll be exploring everything you need to create your first Twitter bot. We'll be using Python 3 for this tutorial, as well as the Tweepy library, which makes the use of the Twitter API easier. Now this video will be split into different sections. The first section will be the setup of Tweepy. The next section will be the basics of using Tweepy. And then in the last section, we'll be creating 3 real-world Twitter bots, namely a reply bot, a like bot, and a retweet bot that will make use of simple Twitter sentiment analysis. All the timestamps are in the video and in the description. I'll be using Visual Studio Code as my code editor, and this will be the account that my bot will run on. And one last thing before we start, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video if it helps. If you have any questions or find any problems, just let me know in the comment section. Let's get into the video. The first thing we need to do is to install Tweepy. Now I'll be using pip or pip to install Tweepy. So I'll head over to my command prompt or terminal and I'll type in pip install Tweepy. Then I'll hit enter and wait for the installation to complete. After this, we need to create a Twitter developer account in order to actually have permission to use their API and all its functions. So I'll go to my internet browser and go to twitter.com. Make sure to be logged in with the account that you want to use the bot on. Also make sure that your account has a phone number added. Then go to more, click on settings and privacy, go to additional resources, developers, apply, then apply for developer account. Choose the one relevant to you. I'll choose hobbyist, and then click on making a bot. Then click on get started. Make sure that all the information here is set up correctly and then click on next. After this, you'll need to give Twitter a bunch of information. Just make sure to be honest and give them everything they need. After you've filled everything in, you can go ahead and click next. This next page basically just gives a summary of all the information. So just review everything, and once you're sure it's correct, you can go ahead and click next. Then we just need to accept the developer agreement and the Twitter developer policy here. Then we can go ahead and click submit application. After that, we should land on this page. Click create project. Give your project a name, then choose the option that best describes the way you intend to use the Twitter developer platform. Then you can give your project a description. Then the last step is to give our app a name. After clicking complete, you'll land on a page where you have 2 API keys as well as a bearer token. Make sure to save all 3 of these in a place where you'll easily be able to find them. So I'll open up Notepad and save them accordingly. Make sure that you know which one is which. After saving all 3 of these, I'll click this cross at the top. Once again, they'll encourage us to save this information, but since we already have, we can go ahead and click yes. We then reach our dashboard, but there are still 2 things we need to do before we set up our bot in Python. Go to projects and apps, click on your app, then here inside settings where it says app permissions, make sure it's set to read and write if you're planning on not only seeing other people's tweets, but creating your own tweets as well. Then go to keys and tokens. Here where it says access token and secret, we want to click generate in order to get 2 new tokens. Make sure to save these in the same place that you saved all your other keys and tokens. Make sure to be able to tell which one is which when saving, then go and click yes, I saved them, and this is all we need to start getting into the code. So I have the project set up here, and the first thing we need to do is to import Tweepy. So we type import Tweepy. After this, we need to authenticate to Twitter by typing 2 lines of code. First, we'll be creating an OAuth handler instance, which we will pass our API keys into. OAuth is basically a way for 2 services to send and receive information between each other without using login details such as your password. This first argument takes your API key as a string, and the second argument takes your API secret key as a string as well. If you want, you can save your API key in a variable like this, and then in here we can pass our API key variable. Now we type auth.set access token, and we'll be passing 2 string arguments in here. The first is our access token, and the second will be our secret access token. Now this next step you don't have to do, it's just so that you can't see what my credentials are. So yours should still look something like this, unless of course you have another method of inserting your credentials into these functions. Alright, so I created a function to go through this text file which stores all my credential info. Then I can use the function to return the credentials and store them into these variables. Now, like I said, this is just that you can't see my info. You can still directly pass in your credential info if you please. Now moving on, we need to create an API object instance in order to access certain methods inside the API class by typing API equals tweepy.api, then passing auth as an argument. This will allow our bot to do tasks such as tweeting, retweeting, reading tweets, liking, and much more. Now we should be done initializing our program. We can now run our program and it should give no errors, hopefully. And just to be even more sure, we can verify our credentials and see if everything works by creating try and accept blocks. And in here we type api.verify credentials. And in this print statement we can type something like everything works, and if the program works, then this will be our output. Then here we can give ourselves an error message and say something went wrong. When we run our code, we see that everything works. Now we have everything set up and we can actually use Tweepy to do the exciting stuff. So as an example, we could create a tweet by typing api.updateStatus, and in this method we pass a string as the actual text that we want to tweet. Now when we run our bot, it says that everything works and we see that the program stopped running. So when we head over to Twitter, we can see our tweet right here. The Tweepy library and Twitter API offer many features, but we'll be focusing on the basic ones, such as tweeting, which we can do by accessing the update status method inside of our API instance object. We do this by typing api.updateStatus, and inside of this method we pass a string of the actual text that we want to tweet. So I'll be typing "this will be our tweet." If we run our program, we can wait until the execution is finished, and if we return to Twitter and refresh the page, we see our tweet right here. Back inside our project, I'll be commenting out this line of code, and we'll then print all tweets inside of our timeline, which might sound advanced, but it's really easy. You just need to bear with me. If we want to find all tweets in our timeline, we can create a variable called timeline tweets, and we'll store an iterable called home timeline, which we get from our API instance object. This will store all tweets in our timeline when this line of code gets executed. Now to get all the tweets, we can use a for loop to iterate through each tweet, and then we can just use an f string to print the author of the tweet using tweet.author.name, and then just a dash to separate the tweet author from the text of the tweet, and then just the text of the tweet by typing tweet.text. If we now run this, we should actually start to see tweets from our timeline coming in, and since my account follows Elon Musk, NASA and such, I'll be getting a lot of their tweets. When the program has stopped running, we can actually still use this code, and we can try to like each tweet in our timeline using the create favorite method, which is inside the API class. Now it's likely to catch errors, so we'll be creating a try and accept block. In the try block, we can type api.createFavorite, and inside of this method we need to pass the ID of the tweet we want to like. So to get the ID, we need to reference our tweets, so we type tweet and then just .id to access the ID of the tweet. In our accept block, we type accept exception as error, and then we can just print the error we get. If we now run our program while having Twitter open on the left side, we can see the program fetching all the tweets, and when it's finally done, I'll refresh my liked page, and as we can see, it now displays the tweets that the bot has liked. Back in our project, I'll comment out all this code as well. I'll now be showing you how to get some information from users, as well as following users. To do this, we can create a variable which will reference our user, and we do this by typing api.getUser. And there are a few parameters you can choose for this method, but I'll choose screen name, which is a parameter that needs the screen name of the account we want to find. And when I say screen name, I really mean the name of the account that has the @ So if you go to SpaceX, we see this one with the @. So I'll copy this, and back inside our project, I'll just paste it as a string inside this parameter. Now we can go ahead and print the name of the account using .name, and we can also print the description of the account using .description. There's so much more information, but these are the basic two that I'll be showing you. We can then also use the create friendship method to follow users. We access this method inside of our API instance object, and in this method we need to pass the ID of the account we want to follow, and we can do so using .id. So let's run it, and as we can see, we get the name and description in the output window, and then we can go back to Twitter, and if we now check which accounts we follow, we see that the bot now follows SpaceX. Back in our project, the first bot that we'll be making is a retweet bot that retweets tweets that mention our name in a positive way. So if someone says anything negative about us, we won't retweet that tweet. But if someone says something positive about us, then we'll retweet their tweet. So for this, we'll need an extra module called TextBlob, which is a Python library used for processing textual data, which we'll be using to decide if a certain tweet is positive or negative. So the bot we'll be creating will also make use of simple Twitter sentiment analysis. And if you don't know what I just said, basically this library will help us decide whether a tweet is positive or negative. So we first need to install this library. So in my command prompt, I'll type pip install textblob and hit enter. After it's done installing, we can close this window and head back into our project. Now we can import the textblob object by typing from textblob import textblob, and we'll also be making use of the time module, so import time as well. Now we can head back down here, and now we just think for a while. What do we want the bot to do? Well, we want the bot to retweet tweets that mention us if it's a positive tweet. So the first step is to find tweets that mention us in the first place. So inside of a while true loop, we can type mentions equal api.mentions timeline, and this will return a list of tweets that mention us. So how do we get the information about those tweets? Well, we iterate through each tweet by typing for mention in mentions, and inside of the print function, we can print the text of the tweet that mentions us by typing mention.text, and then outside of the for loop, we can set a delay, which is why the time module was important here. So we can type time.sleep and set a delay of about 15 seconds. So now we can actually test the bot. So I'll have Twitter open on the one side, and currently I'm not logged in with the bot account. I'm logged in with my main account, and on the right side I have the actual project open with the code we just wrote. So now I'll be running the bot, and on the left side I'll be creating a tweet. I'll say something like, "Hi tutorial account, your mom XD," and tweet it. After some time we should see the bot pick up the tweet and print the text of the tweet into the terminal right here. Before I kill the script though, I'm just gonna let the bot run for a while longer. As you can see, it brought up the same tweet 3 times, and it's gonna keep doing this until we create a new tweet where we mention the bot. So let me create another tweet mentioning the account, and now if you wait a while again, we can see that it does the same thing for each new tweet. Now this might not seem like a problem, but later in our project the bot will try to retweet a tweet that's already been retweeted. So to fix this problem, we need to first of all kill our script. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can either press this kill button right here or just press Ctrl+C and then close this panel. So to fix the problem we had earlier, we need to go outside of the infinite while loop and create a new variable called mention ID and set it to 1. This will store the ID of the latest tweet that mentions us, and you'll see why this is important later. Here, when we search for mentions, we need to directly set a parameter called since ID and pass the mention ID variable we just created. This since ID parameter will search for tweets that have an ID greater of the number that we passed through it. So in our case, it will search for IDs greater than 1. Then whenever we find a mention tweet, we need to set mention ID to the ID of the most recently found mention tweet. This will cause the bot to not repeat finding the same tweet every time, and instead only find tweets that we haven't already found. Now we can go on and do step 2, which is to decide whether this tweet is positive or negative. And we can do this by creating a blob object, which will store inside a variable called mention analysis. And in it, we store text blob. And as an argument to this object, we pass the tweet's text. And don't worry if the tweet contains random characters and symbols such as @ or random names, the bot will classify those as neutral. We'll also need a variable to somehow let us know how positive or negative this tweet is. So we'll say that mention analysis score is equal to mention analysis.sentiment.polarity, and this will give us a decimal number which represents the positivity of the tweet. For instance, if we get 0.3 or 0.6 or 1.0, which is the highest number, then it means the tweet is positive. And if we get something like minus 0.2 or minus 0.8 or minus 0.1, which is the highest negative number, then it means the tweet is negative. So now we can create an F string, and inside it we can type tweet has polarity score of, and then the variable we just created. And then when we open up Twitter and have our project on the right side of the screen again, we can run our code, and on the left I'll type something really positive. I'll be pretending that this tutorial account is some kind of author. So I'll type, "Your books are amazing at tutorial account. I love your work. Keep on doing great things." Then let's tweet this and see what polarity score we get. As we can see, we get a positive score of 0.6. So now let's do the exact opposite thing and type, "At tutorial account, your work is awful. I hate it and you make me miserable." Obviously this is over exaggerated quite a lot, but let's go ahead and tweet it. As we can see, we get a highly negative score of minus 0.9. Now let's do one more tweet where the tweet is mostly positive, but there is some criticism. So, "Hi at tutorial account, I love your work, but one of the chapters was not good. Keep writing great books though." And this gives us a polarity score of 0.3, meaning that it's quite a positive tweet actually. Keep in mind though that this text blob library is quite simple when it comes to sentiment analysis. So if you want to improve the bot, I'll suggest using something a bit more advanced. Moving on though, we have 2 steps down. We can find tweets that mention us, we can determine if the tweet is positive or negative. Now we move on to step 3, which is to retweet the tweet if it is positive. We first need to create a new variable up here called bot ID and store the bot's account ID by typing api.me.id string and then converting it into an integer. You'll see why this is important later. We can then go back here and check if the current tweet is not a reply to another tweet, because we don't want to retweet replies. And then we can check if the tweet author is not ourself, because we don't want to retweet tweets that were created by us. We can then create a nested if statement and check if the mention analysis score is greater than 0.3, because we only want to retweet really positive tweets and not somewhat positive tweets. You can tweak this number if you'd like though. And then we can finally check if we haven't already retweeted this tweet. And then we can go ahead and create a try except block, because it's quite likely to catch errors. In the try block, I'll type api.retweet mention ID. This will retweet the tweet if all of these conditions are satisfied. Then in the except block, I'll type except exception as ER, print ER. Now this should be all the code, but I'll be adding a few more print statements to explain the output and make it a bit easier to understand, as well as for debugging purposes. So let's print mention tweet found, then print an F string which will print the tweet author's name and the text of their tweet. Then here we can print trying retweet. Then here we can type retweet successfully retweeted with a new line. Then we can actually add an else statement to this if statement and print tweet will not be retweeted retweeted with a new line at the end. Now if we open up Twitter on the left side of the screen again and we run our bot, I'll be tweeting a really negative tweet. And if we wait a while for the bot to pick it up, we see here that the polarity score is less than 0.3. So the bot will not be retweeting this tweet. But if we now go ahead and tweet a really positive tweet, then wait for the bot to pick it up, we see that the tweet has a polarity score higher than 0.3. And the bot tells us that the tweet has been retweeted. So if we go back and check on the bot's account, we also see that the positive tweet has in fact been retweeted. So that's all the code for the positive review retweet bot. I'll now be showing you how to create a retweet bot that retweets all tweets containing certain characters. So first of all, we need to create a stream listener, which will check for all incoming tweets which follow certain criteria. We can create our stream listener by creating a class called myStreamListener, which will inherit from streamListener and override the onStatus function. We then add a parameter to this onStatus function called tweet, which will represent the tweets we find. For now, we can just print the author and the text of the tweet. We can then create an instance of our stream listener called streamListener, and then we can create a stream object instance and directly pass two arguments. We first pass api.auth into auth, and then in listener we pass the instance of the stream listener we just created. We can then go ahead and type stream.filter, and this filter method will be responsible for finding our tweets. So the first parameter we need to give is called track, and we need to give it a list of all the terms we want to find tweets of. So let's say we want to find tweets about the Python coding language, then we can type Python. And let's say we also want to find tweets about Elon Musk, we then type Elon Musk. And we can add more if we want, but I'll actually just be searching for tweets containing the word Python. The second argument we pass will also be a list, but this time it's the language of the tweets we want to find. But since I want to only find tweets in English, I'll type EN. If we run our code, everything should actually work now. And as we can see, we start receiving quite a lot of tweets about Python. Now, what if we wanted to retweet each of these that satisfy our future conditions? Well, we need to go back to our onStatus method, and in here we can type the same code we typed earlier where we checked if the tweet was a reply to another tweet and if we are the author of the tweet. And if both of these two conditions are satisfied, so if we're not the author and the tweet is not a reply, then we can go ahead and check if the tweet hasn't been retweeted yet. And if it hasn't been retweeted, we can create the same try and accept blocks from earlier, and we can go ahead and just try to retweet this tweet. And if we catch an exception, let's just print the exception. I'll then be adding a few print commands to again make the output a bit easier to understand. So tweet found, then let's tweet the tweet author and the actual text of the tweet, then attempting retweet, tweet successfully retweeted, and finally we should now be able to run our code. And as we can see, we get a lot of tweets displayed in the output. You get these glimpses of tweets supposedly being retweeted, and every now and then you get glimpses of tweets not being able to be retweeted because we have already retweeted them. Now I'll head back to Twitter. As we can see, we have retweeted some tweets and they all have at least one thing in common, which is the word Python. So in our project, the first thing we need to do is to import time, then create a bot ID variable and convert it to an integer. And we will use this later in our project to check if we are the author of the tweet, because we don't want to reply to ourselves. We can then create a while true loop and then search for all tweets mentioning us by typing mentions equals api.mentions timeline. After this, we can iterate through each mention tweet by typing for mention in mentions, and then we can print something like mention tweet found, as well as an f string which will print the tweet's author and the actual text of the tweet. We can now go outside of the for loop and type time.sleep, which will set a delay to the program, and we can set it to something like 15 seconds. We can now run our bot, and I'll be mentioning the bot account on the left side of the screen on my main Twitter account. And as we can see, everything seems to be working so far. Make sure that when you stop the program, you're actually stopping it and not just closing the output window. So in Visual Studio Code, I'll click this button here and then kill terminal. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is to create a new variable called mention ID and set it to 1. Then inside of the mentions timeline method, we pass mention ID into since ID. And what this will do is it will search for tweets that only contain IDs greater than the number we pass through it. So in our case, it will be 1. The reason we're doing this is because our bot will keep on fetching the same tweets that mention us every single time. And we only want to find tweets that we haven't found already. Make sure to also actually set the mention ID variable to the ID of the next mentioned tweet we find. We then need to create a new variable containing a list of all the words that might indicate that this mention might be a question. So I'll be inserting why, how, when, what, and then just a question mark to top it all off. We can also create a message variable which will store our response for when we actually need to reply to a user. So I'll be typing, if you have any questions, feel free to send us a DM at, and it's important to add this at here because you need to mention the user. We can then add 2 curly braces so that we can format the string later. We can then check if the tweet is not a reply to another tweet because we only want to find tweets that aren't replies. And then we can check if we are not the author of the tweet, which is why why this bot ID variable was important. Then we can check if any of our words are inside of the tweet's text. If not, we can create a try and accept block, and inside of the try block we can print attempting to reply. Then we can create our reply by typing api.updateStatus. The first argument is our message, so message.format. Then we pass mention.author.screenName, and then we need to directly set a parameter called inReplyToStatusID to the ID of the tweet we found. This method will reply to this tweet using this message. Then we can print successfully replied, and inside of the accept block we can accept exception as exe, then just print the exception that we got. Sorry guys, while editing the video I saw a mistake in the code. Just go to this if statement and type if true in, and from there it should work. Now this should actually be all the code for this bot, and if we run it while having Twitter open on the left side of the screen, I'll be mentioning the account and asking a question, something like @tutorialaccount, when is your next video? If we wait a while, we see that the bot found our tweet and that it has successfully replied to it. We can create a second tweet where we mention the bot, but we don't ask a question. So let's just mention the bot account and add some random text. We see that the bot picks this tweet up, but it doesn't attempt to reply to this tweet. If we refresh our page and go back to our tweets, we can see that this one has a comment and this one doesn't. The tweet containing the question has our bot's comment right here, meaning that everything worked, hopefully. The first thing we need to do is to create a stream listener, which will fetch all tweets that satisfy our future conditions. We can create our stream listener by creating a class called myStreamListener, or whatever you want to call it, which will inherit from streamListener and override the onStatus method. We then add a parameter to this onStatus method called tweet, which will represent the tweets we find. For now, we can just print tweet found and then print the author and the text of the tweet. We can then create an instance of our class and call it streamListener. We can then create a stream instance, and inside of this stream object, we pass api.auth into auth and the instance of our stream listener into listener. Then we can call the filter method, which will actually be responsible for finding our tweets. This first parameter we need to pass is called track, and inside of it we need to pass a list of all the keywords we want to find tweets of. So I want to find tweets about Python as well as NASA. And the second parameter we need to fill is called languages, and inside of it we pass a list of the languages we want to find tweets of. But for this tutorial I'll only be interested in finding tweets in English, so I'll type EN. After this we can actually run our bot, and if we wait a while after running, we see that the program picks up all tweets containing the keywords Python and NASA. We can now stop the script and make sure to actually stop it and not just close this panel. So to do this in Visual Studio Code, we need to click this button and then kill terminal, or you can press Ctrl+C. Back inside of our onStatus method, we can check if the tweet is not a reply, because we don't want to like tweets that are replies to other tweets. And we can check if the tweet hasn't already been liked. And if these return true, we can create a try and accept block, and inside the try block we can print attempting like, and then to actually like the tweet we can type api.createFavorite, and as an argument the ID of the tweet we want to like. Then afterwards we can print tweet successfully liked. Then in the accept block we can type accept exception as ER, and then just print the exception that we got. After this we should be able to run our program, and after a while we should see tweets start coming in, and we can see that the bot claims to have liked some. So if I keep on refreshing this liked page, we will also start to see new tweets that have been liked by our bot account. And with all said, that brings us to the end of the video, where I'll let you know that I deeply appreciate you watching till the end. All the code will be available on GitHub, and if you found any problems with the code or video, or you have any suggestions on future tutorials, please let me know. I also want to remind you to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you found it helpful, and I hope to see you in the next one.